When I moved into Maplewood Estates, I thought I'd finally found peace. The lawns were trimmed, neighbors waved politely, and the community rules seemed simple enough. For a while it felt perfect, the kind of suburban calm you only see in real estate ads. But peace doesn't last long when an HOA is involved, especially when someone like Karen Whitmore is in charge. She wasn't just the HOA president, she was the self-proclaimed guardian of the neighborhood. Every mailbox label, every fence color, every trash bin had to pass her approval. Her presence was everywhere, in community emails, on the bulletin board, even on our phones through her constant text reminders. At first I didn't mind it. I figured it was just her way of staying organized. But then, one morning, something strange happened. I got an email reminder about my quarterly HOA dues. Same format, same logo, same signature line from Karen, only this time, instead of mailing a check, it directed us to a new online payment system. It looked official, clean interface, secure-looking link, everything in place. Convenient and safe, the message said. I was skeptical, but when I asked a few neighbors, they said they'd already paid through it. So I followed the crowd and made my payment. Simple enough, or so I thought. A week later, during a casual conversation, I mentioned the new payment system to a member of the HOA board. His reaction caught me off guard. He stared at me blankly and said, "What new payment system?" That's when the first red flag went up. I showed him the email on my phone. His face drained of color as he scrolled. The official HOA email address was correct, but the payment link wasn't one they'd set up. In fact, no one on the board had even heard of an online portal. That's when the panic began spreading through the neighborhood. Residents realized they'd all received the same email, and dozens had already paid their dues through that website. Thousands of dollars. Gone. Rumors started flying instantly. Some thought hackers had breached our HOA emails. Others whispered about an inside job. Karen, of course, acted shocked, calling emergency meetings, sending dramatic updates, and blaming cybercriminals targeting our community. But something about her reaction felt off. Her panic looked rehearsed. Every word she said was overly polished, like she was trying to steer suspicion away before it even landed. I had a gut feeling this wasn't some random hacker. It was closer to home, maybe too close. That night, I sat down and started investigating the email headers, the website code, and the domain name. Luckily, I work in IT, so I knew where to look. Within an hour, I found the first clue, the domain registration details. The fake website had been registered just 2 weeks before the first payment reminder went out, and the registrant's IP address wasn't hidden. It traced back to our very own neighborhood network. I couldn't believe it. Someone inside Maplewood Estates had built that fake payment site, someone with enough access to mimic HOA emails and make everything look legitimate. The next morning, I quietly checked the neighborhood Wi-Fi subnet logs. A few residents use a shared service provider, and one IP stood out, belonging to the Whitmore household, Karen's house. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe her email got hacked. But my curiosity was burning. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. I took screenshots, downloaded the fake site's source code, and compared it to the official HOA templates. The resemblance was uncanny. Even the image files were copied directly from our actual website's hosting directory. That meant whoever built it had access to internal files. When I confronted one of the HOA's tech volunteers, he admitted something shocking. Karen's teenage son, Ethan, had been helping her with online stuff for months. He was a computer science student, known around the neighborhood for fixing laptops and setting up routers. That one piece of information connected everything. The fake domain, the timing, the local IP address. It all pointed to him, but exposing it wasn't going to be easy. Karen had influence, connections, and a reputation for turning every accusation into a personal attack. She'd twist the story until you looked like the villain. So I knew if I was going to bring this out, I needed undeniable proof and witnesses. Meanwhile, panic turned to anger among residents. Over $18,000 had been paid through the fake site, and nobody knew where the money went. Some neighbors demanded police involvement, but Karen insisted on handling it internally. That's when things really started to smell rotten. During one late-night board email exchange, Karen suddenly claimed she'd discovered traces of malware responsible for the scam. She said it had already been dealt with and urged everyone to stop spreading false rumors. But when I checked the so-called malware report she attached, it was a PDF created on her son's laptop. I knew because the file metadata listed E. Whitmore as the author. I didn't say anything immediately. I wanted to catch them red-handed. So I set up a simple digital trap, a decoy email slightly altered from the real HOA layout, containing a unique tracking link. Within hours, someone accessed it, and the IP matched perfectly with the same device that had created the fake payment site. Now, I had proof, not just suspicion, proof that the scam originated from the Whitmore home. But before I could take it to the board, Karen launched a new campaign, blaming an outside phishing group and positioning herself as the hero who saved the HOA from collapse. She was even praised by a few residents for her swift action. It was infuriating. The very person behind the scam was now being celebrated for stopping it. That's when I decided enough was enough. I started compiling a full digital evidence file. Screenshots, IP logs, metadata reports, timestamps, and payment receipts. I planned to present everything at the upcoming HOA meeting, but I underestimated how far Karen would go to protect her image. A day before the meeting, I received a notice taped to my door, a violation letter claiming my front porch light was non-compliant with HOA standards. A petty move, but it was her way of sending a message. Stay quiet, or things get ugly. I didn't respond. I knew exactly what she was doing. That night, as I reviewed my notes one last time, my computer froze. Then suddenly, the screen went black. When it rebooted, half of my evidence folder was gone. Deleted. Someone had remotely accessed my system. For a moment, I sat there in silence, staring at the empty folders. Panic turned into anger. This wasn't just about stolen money anymore. It was about control, lies, and manipulation that ran deeper than anyone realized. And I wasn't backing down, because if Karen thought she could bury the truth, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The morning after my files vanished, I felt the pressure closing in. My gut told me it wasn't some random system error, it was retaliation. Karen must have realized I was getting close, and someone on her side had hacked my laptop to erase everything. But what she didn't know was that I'd backed up all my files to an external drive. Every screenshot, every metadata report, every trace of Ethan's involvement, all safe, locked away. Still, I played along. I acted as if I'd lost everything, replying to her latest HOA email with fake concern about malware still spreading. It was bait, and I wanted to see how she'd respond. Within an hour, she replied with a long message, thanking me for my vigilance and saying she'd consulted a cybersecurity expert, her son, Ethan. That was all the confirmation I needed. She was still letting him meddle with HOA systems, even after the website scam. It felt surreal, a mother covering for her son while the entire community paid the price. That week, the neighborhood was in chaos. Dozens of residents demanded refunds, but there was no record of where the payments had gone. Karen kept delaying answers, claiming the bank was still investigating. The board members were split. Half believed her, half were starting to doubt. Meanwhile, I kept investigating quietly. I used a separate device this time, completely offline. I wanted to find out how the payments were being routed. By cross-referencing the fake site's transaction logs, I traced the payments to a temporary online wallet that had already been emptied. But the withdrawal IP, once again, pointed straight to a local connection in our area. It was too precise to be coincidence. Ethan had used his own home network to pull the money out. The realization hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just some prank gone too far. It was fraud. Actual theft from neighbors, families, retirees, and single parents who trusted the HOA system. As I pieced everything together, I started documenting every move Karen made. She began hosting small, crisis control meetings in her backyard, gathering loyal neighbors to spin a narrative. She told them the scam was the result of a sophisticated hacker group and hinted that I might be involved somehow, since I was the one who discovered it first. Classic Karen's strategy: turn suspicion into deflection. But her story started to crack when one resident, Mrs. Holloway, noticed something odd. Her payment receipt from the fake website listed an email address for confirmation, and that email ended in @whitmore-tech.com, a private domain Ethan had used for his college projects. When she showed it to me, my suspicions solidified into certainty. I wasn't just chasing shadows anymore. I had proof connecting Ethan directly to the stolen funds. Still, I knew Karen would deny everything unless the evidence was presented in front of everyone. The next community meeting was my only shot. In the days leading up to it, I prepared meticulously. I organized every file, timestamp, and data point into a clear presentation. I didn't want just accusations. I wanted an airtight case that no one could twist. But Karen wasn't idle either. Flyers started appearing around the neighborhood. Protect Maplewood from misinformation. They warned residents against rumors and fabricated evidence, and urged everyone to stand by your trusted HOA leadership. Her manipulation was in full swing. By the night of the meeting, the tension was thick. The community hall was packed, residents whispering, phones recording, everyone waiting for answers. Karen stood at the front, perfectly composed, wearing her signature pearl necklace and a look of false confidence. Ethan sat beside her, head slightly lowered, pretending to scroll his phone. The meeting started like usual: budget updates, landscaping issues, the same boring routine. Then came the security breach section. Karen launched into her speech about cyber threats and how she and her son had worked tirelessly to protect the HOA's integrity. That's when I stood up. I told the board I had new information. The room fell silent. Karen tried to cut me off, saying it wasn't the time, but several neighbors insisted I speak. So I walked up to the projector, plugged in my USB drive, and displayed the first slide. It started with the fake payment website's registration details, then the transaction logs, then the IP traces, and finally, the screenshot of the payment confirmation email containing @whitmore-tech.com. Each slide drew louder murmurs from the crowd. By the time I reached the last one, showing the metadata listing E. Whitmore as the file author, the room was buzzing. Karen's face had turned pale, her lips pressed tight. Ethan looked frozen. I explained how the payments were funneled through a temporary wallet, how the domain had been registered under their home network, and how the supposed malware report was forged to mislead everyone. Karen tried to interrupt, saying it was all technical nonsense, but the data was too clear. Even the HOA treasurer, who'd always defended her, started asking questions she couldn't answer. When I finished, there was dead silence. Then, slowly, residents began to whisper, louder, angrier, demanding the truth. One by one, people started standing up, asking for refunds, demanding accountability. That's when Karen snapped. She shouted that I was spying on her family, that I had no right to access their internet data, and that this was all a personal vendetta. She even threatened to sue for defamation, but her voice shook. She knew she'd lost control of the narrative. Before things could escalate, one of the board members motioned to pause the meeting and call for an independent audit. Karen tried to object, but the majority voted in favor. The audit was approved. For the first time, she wasn't in charge. When the meeting ended, I saw Ethan slip out the back door, avoiding eye contact. Karen followed minutes later, her composure completely gone. The neighbors gathered around me afterward, some in shock, some thankful, some still confused. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The next morning, Karen's house looked deserted. Her car was gone, curtains drawn, and her phone went straight to voicemail. But before she disappeared, she'd sent one last mass email to the entire community, a desperate attempt to twist the story one final time. In it, she claimed she and her son were victims of a coordinated smear campaign. She said the evidence was fake and that the audit would clear their names. She ended it with a line that sent a chill down my spine. Some people will regret crossing me when the truth comes out. I knew then that she wasn't done. That same evening, I received a call from the audit company confirming their start date. But the next part shocked me. The company reported that someone had already tried to contact them earlier that day, pretending to be me, attempting to cancel the request. That's when I realized Karen was still fighting behind the scenes, deleting trails, manipulating contacts, trying to rewrite the story before the truth could fully surface. But this time, I was ready. I had off-site backups, copies stored on cloud drives, and multiple neighbors who'd seen the evidence firsthand. She couldn't erase it anymore. Still, part of me couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get worse before they got better. Because Karen wasn't the type to surrender. She was the type to retaliate. And as the audit team began their work, rumors started swirling again. Some said Karen had fled town. Others claimed Ethan had been questioned by the police, but no one really knew what was coming next. All I knew was that Maplewood Estates was on the edge of something bigger, a full-blown collapse of the HOA as we knew it, and I was standing right in the middle of the storm. The audit team arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, 3 professionals carrying laptops, clipboards, and quiet determination. Word spread fast. Within hours, half the neighborhood was peeking from windows, waiting for updates. For a community obsessed with gossip, this was the biggest story Maplewood Estates had ever seen. Karen and Ethan were nowhere to be found. Their house sat dark, blinds drawn, mailbox overflowing. It was eerie, like they'd vanished overnight, but I knew better. This was her retreat before the storm. Karen wasn't done. She was regrouping. The auditors began combing through the HOA records, comparing every payment receipt, email log, and financial statement. The deeper they looked, the worse it got. Discrepancies everywhere, missing funds, duplicate transactions, altered entries. It wasn't just the fake website anymore. It was years of quiet mismanagement, buried under spreadsheets and forged signatures. For days, I watched from a distance as the truth started crawling into daylight. The auditors called multiple residents for verification, and every testimony painted the same picture. Karen had turned the HOA into her personal playground. The website scam was only the final act, the moment everything cracked open. On the 3rd day, one of the auditors approached me for details about the fake domain evidence I'd found. I shared everything again, the IP traces, the wallet transactions, and the screenshots that connected the dots. When they saw Ethan's name in the metadata, their expressions said it all. The case was clear. The next week, the audit's preliminary report went public. The findings were explosive. It confirmed that over $18,400 had been funneled through a fake website registered to the Whitmore household. Ethan had created and managed the domain. Payments were routed into a temporary account that was later transferred into another under his name. The report also revealed that Karen had falsified multiple HOA financial records to hide irregularities, including the missing dues. When the report leaked to the residents' group chat, the neighborhood erupted. Message after message flooded in. Shock, anger, betrayal. People who'd once defended Karen were now turning against her. Some demanded police involvement. Others wanted the entire HOA board dissolved. For years, Karen had ruled with manipulation and intimidation. Now, the mask had finally cracked. That night, an emergency meeting was called. It felt different this time, not organized by Karen, but by the remaining board members and the auditors. The room buzzed with tension. Dozens of residents packed into the hall, phones recording, voices overlapping. When the lead auditor stepped up to the mic, the entire place went silent. He explained everything: the digital evidence, the financial trail, the cover-up attempts. Then he said the words everyone had been waiting to hear. The investigation concludes that both Karen Whitmore and her son, Ethan, are responsible for the fraudulent website and the misappropriation of HOA funds. The room exploded in noise, gasps, whispers, outrage. Some cheered, some just sat frozen. It was over. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt heavy. Because underneath all that chaos, there was still a neighborhood. People who'd just learned their trust had been weaponized against them. The board voted unanimously to remove Karen as president, effective immediately. Notices were sent out to every homeowner. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen, pending a legal review. The auditors turned their report over to local authorities for potential criminal charges. For the first time in years, Karen no longer controlled anything in Maplewood Estates. But the aftermath wasn't clean. The community fractured into sides: those who wanted to rebuild the HOA and those who wanted to dissolve it completely. Meetings turned into arguments, lawsuits were threatened, and in the middle of it all, I became an unwilling symbol of the entire ordeal. Some thanked me for exposing the truth. Others blamed me for ruining the neighborhood's image. It was surreal watching people twist the narrative again, almost like Karen's ghost still lingered, whispering through their doubts. A week later, a neighbor texted me something strange. He'd seen Karen's car parked outside the county administration building. Later that afternoon, word spread that she'd met with a lawyer. By evening, rumors circulated that she was planning to sue the HOA for wrongful removal. Typical Karen. Even cornered, she refused to admit defeat. But that lawsuit never came. Instead, local police confirmed that both Karen and Ethan were under formal investigation for fraud and digital theft. When officers arrived at their home with a warrant, they found several external drives, bank statements, and a laptop matching the fake website's IP logs. It was undeniable. The news spread across the town like wildfire. Everyone had an opinion. Some pitied her, saying she'd only done it to help her son's future. Others said she deserved prison. For me, it was closure, not celebration, just quiet relief that the nightmare was finally unraveling. In the weeks that followed, the HOA was temporarily suspended. No board meetings, no dues, no fines. For the first time since I'd moved there, the neighborhood felt peaceful. Grass grew a little too long, mailboxes mismatched, but no one cared. People smiled again. Conversations returned to normal life, not rules and violations. Still, reminders of what happened were everywhere. The bulletin board where Karen's flyers once hung now displayed a single printed notice: New beginnings for Maplewood Estates. Transparency, accountability, community. It was simple, but it felt powerful. A few of us volunteered to rebuild the board from scratch. No politics, no power games. We drafted new rules, set up open financial tracking, and made every meeting public. Slowly, the community started healing. One evening, as I walked past Karen's old house, I noticed the "For Sale" sign had finally gone up. The windows were empty, lights off, lawn overgrown. For years, that house had been the center of control, fear, and manipulation. Now it was just another property waiting for a new chapter. I paused for a moment, looking at the place where all the chaos had started. What began as a simple payment email had exposed a web of lies that nearly tore our entire HOA apart. But maybe it needed to happen. Maybe the system had to break for people to finally open their eyes. Weeks later, I received a final email from the auditors. The investigation had concluded, and the funds recovered from Ethan's accounts would be returned to the homeowners. Justice, in some way, had been served. But the biggest change wasn't financial, it was cultural. People stopped fearing the HOA. They started questioning, discussing, participating. The neighborhood that once obeyed blindly now demanded transparency. Looking back, I realized Karen's obsession with control had blinded her. She built a system so tight that even her own downfall came from within it, through the very rules and access she used to dominate others. The fake website wasn't just a scam, it was a reflection of everything she'd built, polished on the surface, rotten underneath. And as for me, I finally felt peace again. Not the quiet, artificial peace that comes from compliance, but the kind that grows from truth. Sometimes, standing up against corruption doesn't make you popular. It makes you a target. But in the end, when the dust settles, truth always finds its way through the cracks. Maplewood Estates isn't perfect, it never will be, but at least now, when I walk down the street, I don't see fear in my neighbor's eyes. I see resilience, because after everything we went through, one thing became clear. Control can build a community, but only honesty can save it. And that's how Karen's son's fake website didn't just collapse their scam. It collapsed the entire illusion that had kept us silent for years.